The fire crackled low, barely piercing the cold hush of the desert night. Beyond its flicker, the horizon was a black ocean, empty save for stars and wind. Yet not all lights in the outback come from the sky. Not all have names spoken aloud. Jack Kingsley never meant to become part of the story. In 1998, just a bloke behind the wheel of a long-haul truck hauling freight through the emptiness between Boulia and Birdsville. He'd driven that stretch before. But this time, just past midnight, something hovered above the Gibber Plain. A light, bright as a flare, silent and too steady to be natural. At first, he thought it might be a helicopter, but there was no thump of blades, just silence and the eerie hum of his own engine. Then the light moved, smooth, swift, unnervingly intelligent. When Jack pressed the pedal, the light matched him. When he braked, it stilled. At one point he stopped completely, stepping out into the dust and diesel. The light didn't move, didn't waver, just floated there, patient, watching. That night, Jack turned back toward Mount Isa, radioing in a garbled report. He quit trucking 2 weeks later, said the desert was never empty again. But Jack's tale wasn't new. Not really. Long before highways scarred this land, the Walpiri people whispered of such lights. They called them Jukurpa, not merely ghost lights, but the living echoes of spirits lost to the dreaming. These weren't just souls wandering, they were warnings, markers in the night that meant a story had gone wrong. In 1966, near the stony flats outside Boulia, a sheep farmer vanished. He'd been driving his ute out past the boundary fence looking for a strayed ewe. His last words crackled through the station radio, "They're calling me!" Then static. They found his dog days later, ears torn from howling. The ute stood empty, doors open. But the man had melted into the earth, as if never born. The coordinates of that night, burnt into police reports and still whispered by stockmen, point to a precise dot on the map. 229083 Trudig S, 1399083 Digi. People avoid that place. Livestock won't graze there, and when the moon is full, some say the ground glows faintly blue. The elders believe those lights aren't just echoes, they're choices. If they follow you, you have to choose what kind of soul you are. The strong stay rooted, the weak drift, just like the farmer did, just like others have. And the lights haven't stopped. The outback sky is a liar. It tells you you're alone, surrounds you with a silence so wide it echoes your heartbeat back through the dust. But out here, isolation is an illusion. There are things that see, things that move when you blink, and sometimes they glow. By 1988, the stories had stacked up like bones in a dry creek bed. Stockmen, prospectors, tourists with rented 4WDs. They all had something to say about the lights. Not vague accounts, but sharp, consistent details. Spheres of brilliant white or bluish light, the size of footballs or larger, gliding silently just above the spinifex. Some floated alongside vehicles like curious spirits. Others darted ahead, leading travelers into country where compasses spun and radios died. They never made a sound, but their presence buzzed like electricity in your blood. That year, under mounting pressure from civilian sightings, the Royal Australian Air Force opened an informal inquiry. 37 incidents were logged. 9 were declared unexplained. Not mistaken planets or swamp gas, not misidentified headlights from distant road trains. These were lights that changed shape, pulsed with intelligence, and followed aircraft in impossible flight paths. One such incident involved a pair of pilots returning from Alice Springs. As they crossed a barren patch near the Hay River, their instruments began flickering. Then, out of the darkness, a radiant orb rose to meet them. It moved with them, veering when they veered, stopping when they tried to lose it. The co-pilot described it as a living thing, curious, maybe even amused. After 30 minutes, it blinked out like a dying star. No trace remained, but both men resigned weeks later. PTSD, they said. Officially, the RAF filed those 9 cases away, marked them as atypical atmospheric phenomena. But one officer, a weather technician based in Woomera, leaked his own notes. He called the lights active, said they responded to sound and movement, that they behaved more like predators than weather. He claimed to have captured electromagnetic anomalies where the lights had been, spikes that corresponded not to storms or solar flares, but to something else entirely. Publicly, nothing more was said. The sightings quieted down for a while, like the desert had drawn a breath and held it. But the stories kept coming, especially from the towns that barely made it onto maps. People in Wycliffe Well, known as Australia's UFO capital, told tales with haunted eyes. Locals spoke of cars killed mid-drive, of strange lights hovering above windmills, of livestock vanishing with not a trace save scorched earth and frightened dogs. And then there was the footage. Shaky, grainy, recorded on a VHS camcorder by a German backpacker camped near Tanami Track. He'd set up to capture stars and got more than he bargained for. 2 lights danced across the horizon, erratic, swift, weaving in tandem like something rehearsed. They'd merge, separate, then burst upward before fading. The man brought the tape to Alice Springs, terrified and desperate. But the footage disappeared, taken, he claimed, by a man in uniform who spoke too softly and smiled too much. The man left the country the next day. What lingers in the minds of those who've seen the Min Min lights isn't just the sight itself, it's the feeling that you've been noticed by something older, something vast and watching from the cracks in reality. The desert's silence doesn't protect you, it amplifies. If you scream out here, nothing echoes back, unless the lights decide to answer. They say there's a pattern, though no one agrees on what it means. The lights appear more frequently under full moons, and most often at 3:17 a.m., always 3:17, as if that moment were a door the rest of time had forgotten to shut. Watches stop, hearts race. And after, a quiet comes so thick you forget your own name. What are they? Pilots say extraterrestrial, locals say ghosts. Scientists, those few who dare to admit they're curious, offer the term Fata Morgana. A thermal mirage, they say. A trick of light refracted across layers of hot and cold air, making distant headlights appear where they shouldn't be. But that doesn't explain why they follow you, why they pause when you do, why they vanish the moment you speak their name aloud. The desert doesn't care what theories you believe, it just watches and waits. The further you go into the outback, the more the rules blur. What's up becomes down in the heat shimmer. What's alive may not breathe. And what follows you might not be behind you at all. People who've lived here long enough speak of patterns not written in books, but whispered in cracked verandas over cups of tea gone cold. They know which gullies to avoid, which rocks never to touch. And they know this: if the Min Min lights find you alone, they'll leave a mark no doctor can treat. Those who have encountered the lights and lived to speak of it don't talk much. Some suffer from insomnia. Others retreat entirely from town life. One stockman, Gus Delaney, vanished in the Tanami in 2001 and was found 3 days later without shoes, sun-blistered, clutching a lump of quartz he claimed was humming. He never returned to work, never left Alice Springs again. His mates said something had snapped inside him, that the desert had taken a piece and swapped it for silence. There's a disturbing consistency among the victims. They were always alone. They always heard something before the light appeared, not a voice exactly, more like a breath against the back of the neck. And each of them, without fail, reported their watch or phone freezing at exactly 3:17 a.m. It's easy to dismiss that as coincidence, but patterns don't often ask for belief, they just keep repeating. The journals of a desert ecologist named Fiona Latimer, recovered posthumously in 2009, add another layer. Latimer had spent 3 years tracking marsupial populations near Baduri when she began noticing strange nocturnal disturbances, animals vanishing from traps, cameras blacking out. On the final pages of her last field book, she wrote, "I saw them. Twin orbs, hovering just above the Gibber Plain. I followed them. It felt like a test." Her final sentence reads, 3:17, time uncoils. Her body was found weeks later, curled beside a burnt-out tent. The coroner cited exposure. But her equipment was untouched, and all of it, GPS, phone, camera, displayed the same time, frozen like a photograph of the void, 3:17. Some believe this time is more than symbolic. The reverse of 1:17 p.m., often dubbed the hour of clarity. 3:17 a.m. is, in some occult traditions, the inverted threshold, a moment where dimensional veils thin. Whether ancient lore or convenient myth, the correlation remains. And what of the lights themselves? There's an unnatural intelligence in how they move. Witnesses describe them weaving in front of cars, hovering over creeks, darting behind hillocks, always just out of reach. But it's not just the movement. It's the feeling, a growing pressure, a prickling along the skin, as if your presence is being weighed, measured. A miner once swore he tried to catch one, chased it in his Land Cruiser through dry creek beds until he hit a tree and shattered his leg. Said the light hovered above him, close enough to touch, and he heard it say his name. Not a sound, he claimed, but the idea of his name, placed into his skull like a memory he didn't make. He lay there till sunrise. When rescue arrived, the engine of his vehicle was cold, the battery drained, but the dash clock, still blinking, was locked at 3:17. The tales began to merge. So many clocks, so many vanishings, always alone, always at that same hour. Some researchers compiled a map overlay of these incidents, layering them over lunar cycles. The result was chilling. Spikes in disappearances during full moons, especially in the warmer months, as if the lights fed on visibility, on heat, or on something else entirely. Something to do with time's elasticity in this place. A pattern emerged, faint but unrelenting, like a frequency broadcast just outside human hearing, like a riddle in reverse. But in the outback, too much logic can be dangerous. Here, belief becomes a kind of armor, and disbelief, an invitation. So now people leave offerings near the edges of the towns, old coins, beads, carvings, not because they understand, but because it feels wrong not to. Because when the wind picks up and the dogs whine low, even the strongest among them listen for that whisper, that breath that says follow. And some do. They say science is the language of truth. Equations don't lie. Thermometers, spectrometers, the data humming from machines, it all points somewhere. But in the outback, truth doesn't wear a lab coat. It rides in on dust storms, curls beneath fingernails, mutters from the cracks in dried creek beds. Still, the scientists came, armed with their charts and sensors, hoping to net a mystery in formulas. What they found was something colder than fact, older than theory. At a university lab tucked behind Brisbane's red brick sprawl, physicist Dr. Irene Havelock has spent over a decade studying light anomalies. She began with optical illusions, the way temperature shifts bend light over vast flatlands. What the world calls min-min lights, she called atmospheric mirages, specifically fata morgana, a phenomenon where layers of hot and cold air distort distant sources, creating floating, shifting images. But even Dr. Havelock admitted something didn't fit. She and her team deployed thermal drones into the Simpson Desert during a stretch of unusually dry, still nights. They expected to find temperature inversions, patterns of light bending explainable by the topography. Instead, the drones captured orbs, bright, hovering, unconnected to any known light source. When motion sensors were tripped, the lights would retreat, only to return, hovering closer each time. In one sequence, a technician clapped his hands near a sensor. The light pulsed in response. This, Havelock said in a recorded interview, shouldn't be possible. Light doesn't respond to sound, not like this. This is interaction. This is not just illusion. Something is aware. Her words weren't popular in academic circles. Funding dried up. The project was quietly archived. But one of her grad students, a quiet lad from Darwin named Marcus Cho, didn't stop. He embedded himself in Boulia, taking seasonal work, slipping into the rhythms of the place. He built his own rig, infrared cameras, magnetic sensors, even an old Geiger counter. What he documented became part of what's now called the Boulia Incident Log, a collection of unsanctioned but meticulously kept records. His most famous entry described a night in late November, a low wind, no moon. He was out near the old cattle fence when 3 lights appeared in sequence, like a set of eyes blinking open. They moved with him, not toward, but around, orbiting. His sensors picked up no radiation, no heat signature, but the magnetometer spiked. And his audio recorder, though seemingly blank when enhanced, held a whisper. Not words, just the sound of movement inside stone. He left Boulia a year later. Didn't speak of it again. His footage lives online in fragments, endlessly dissected, dismissed, revered. A cult has grown around the data, people calling the lights sentient, ancient, even divine. Others brand them government tech gone rogue. Some say Australia has its own Roswell, buried in the red clay, guarded not by men, but by silence. And there's always the silence. Not absence of sound, but a presence in itself, too full, like something breathing just beyond the hearing range. Many who've encountered the lights describe a sensation of being in a story not yet written, a script forming around them, a choice arriving uninvited. Science provides outlines, shapes in the fog, but out here, outlines don't hold. They melt under the pressure of whatever walks the desert at night. One theory, whispered among fringe physicists and psychonauts, suggests the lights are fractures, tears in perception where the laws of time, space, even identity stretch thin. In these places, reality hiccups. The lights are not things, but symptoms, the result of the Outback's weight pressing down on time like a thumb on soft fruit. They flicker, because we do. Dr. Havelock, long retired, lives alone near Rockhampton now. When asked if she still believes the lights are explainable, she only said, "Science explains what it can measure, but not everything wants to be measured." What does that leave us with? Lights that think, patterns that taunt, stories older than memory, still unfolding, and a name, Min Min, that clings to them like an alias, shielding whatever they truly are. Still, the desert waits. Still they come. The desert doesn't forget. It swallows, slowly, and sometimes it gives something back, never whole, never clean, but just enough to remind you it's watching. That's what happened in 1966, when the dog came back. The sheep farmer, Arthur Briggs, had been a known figure in the backcountry near Boulia, reliable, solitary, quiet. He ran stock across brittle land, never one to chase shadows or drink too much. So when his voice crackled over the HF radio saying, "They're calling me," it rattled more than static. He'd set out to check a broken gate after dusk, a routine chore in a place where night falls heavy and fast. He didn't come back. 3 days later, his cattle dog, Bluey, was found scratching at the edge of a ranger's camp, ribs poking through, tongue dry as paper. But it wasn't the dog's condition that raised eyebrows, it was the collar. Tucked beneath the faded leather strap was a smear of phosphorescent residue, faintly glowing even under the harsh noon sun. Samples were sent to Brisbane. Initial analysis was inconclusive. Organic, yes, but not from anything catalogued. The substance defied normal decay, resisting even alcohol-based solvents. One scientist remarked offhandedly, "It's alive somehow, or was." That report never made it to public records. Weeks later, the findings were sealed under directive from a little-known division within the Australian Department of Environment. By 1989, the entire case file, photos, recordings, substance samples, was classified. Those involved received official statements reminding them of confidentiality clauses. One technician disappeared from university records. Her family said she'd taken a post overseas. The university listed her as relocated. The disappearance of Arthur Briggs never made headlines. A missing man in the Outback? Common as sand. But in fringe circles, his story grew like a fungal bloom. Forum threads, radio broadcasts, even bush poetry referenced him as the one who followed. Some claimed the glowing substance was proof of extra-dimensional contact. Others called it soul light, remnants of human essence pulled into something older, changed and released. What's undeniable is the pattern that re-emerged after Briggs, a rise in lights near livestock paths, especially during droughts. A stockwoman from Mount Isa reported seeing lights drifting just above a dry riverbed, pulsing rhythmically like beacons. Her dogs refused to go near. Later that night, 2 of her horses bolted into the desert. Only one returned, skittish, its eyes cloudy with something not fear, but confusion. Researchers who dare to touch the classified files, those with access to archived meteorological data, note that the years following Briggs's disappearance show an uptick in localized atmospheric anomalies, particularly in the latitude band between Boulia and Bedourie. Lights become more frequent, clocks more erratic. And in 2 rare instances, audio recordings captured bursts of layered frequencies, overlapping like overlapping radio stations. Some sounded like voices, others like wind moving through teeth. But why was the Briggs case sealed? Some believe he stumbled upon something forbidden. Not UFOs in the cinematic sense, but contact, something primal and native to this land's breath. Others speculate the government knows the truth, has always known, and has simply built its fences, not with wire, but with silence. What the official reports fail to explain is this. Why did the lights change after Briggs? Why did they grow bolder? Before, they were flickers, distant, ambiguous. After, they circled cars, pressed against tents, whispered names. And then there's the matter of the dog. Bluey lived 3 more years, wouldn't leave the homestead. Refused to look into mirrors or water. He slept facing corners, barked at empty rooms, and sometimes just before dawn, his collar would glow again. Faint, but there. Some say that whatever Arthur heard that night, whatever he followed, left a piece behind, tangled in the dog's blood, a message, a warning, a residue of something that doesn't belong here. The desert holds that answer close, and the lights, they just wait. There's a point beyond isolation where the mind begins to bend, soften like clay in fire. Out here, distance isn't measured in kilometers, but in what you leave behind. Your name, your purpose, your memory. And when the Min lights appear, they don't just illuminate the land, they carve into it, into you. After Arthur Briggs vanished and the dog came back glowing, something shifted. The lights grew bolder, yes, but also stranger. Reports changed in tone, less awe, more dread. Less wonder, more resignation, as if the lights had shed any pretense of being mere phenomena and now revealed their true shape, not as objects, but presences, intentions made visible. In 1974, a geologist named Robert Tamberlin documented a series of lights following his crew across the Barclay tableland. He was a man of method, skeptical by blood. For days they noticed flickering lights at the edge of camp. He blamed headlamps, tricks of dusk. Then came the 3rd night. Their radios hissed open without prompting, not static, something wetter, breathing. They found strange, symmetrical scorch marks in the grass the next morning, perfectly round. And their watches? 3:17 a.m. across the board. All synced, all stopped. Tamberlin left geology soon after, took up painting, abstracts full of circles and jagged spirals. When asked why, he simply said, "It helps me forget the rhythm." What rhythm? That question would resurface again in 1983 when a woman named John Mulroney went missing for 6 days near the Plenty Highway. She was found wandering barefoot, dehydrated, mumbling about lights that sang. Medical scans revealed nothing out of place, but under hypnosis, she spoke in a language that no linguist could match. Not gibberish, structured, tonal, haunting. When played backward, it resembled old recordings of Walpiri chant. Elders who listened said it wasn't their tongue, but it was close, close enough to be kin, close enough to remember. The connection between the lights and indigenous lore deepened with time. More and more elders came forward, cautiously, describing lights not as danger but as consequence. The Jukurpa, the dreaming, isn't just history, it's continuity. And the lights, some say, are guardians of breach, punishers of forgetting. They come when the land is disrespected, when stories are silenced, when truth is buried beneath concrete and roads. That's why they follow, that's why they wait. In 1996, a convoy of environmental researchers from Melbourne set up near the Georgina River. They wanted to study water salinity. What they found was a pattern in the soil, a residue forming lattice-like structures only visible under blacklight. The lights appeared on their 4th night, forming a triangle above their camp. 3 spheres, silent, watching. One researcher ran into the bush. Was found 2 days later, laughing, speaking in rhyme. She never recovered. The others refused to testify publicly. But one wrote in her private journal, "They're not just lights, they're questions, and they don't like wrong answers." By then, the government's silence had become its own kind of signal. Every leaked memo, every redacted document only added fuel to the fire. Were the lights being studied, contained, or worshipped? A growing online community insisted the truth lay in the soil, specifically the clay deposits near Boulia, a rare mineral found only there, capable of storing electromagnetic charge far beyond known parameters. Conspiracy theorists connected it to energy weapons, alien tech, even psychic amplifiers. But the elders knew better. They said the earth remembers what we won't. The most compelling clue came not from a scientist or a local, but from a child. In 2004, a boy named Kieran was camping with his father near Kurabulka. He wandered off after dark, drawn by what he called the warm stars. When they found him an hour later, he was sitting cross-legged in the dust, eyes wide, hands glowing faintly green. He said the lights spoke to him, that they showed him the real shapes of people. His words were dismissed as dream talk. But his hands bore no pigment for 3 days, no prints, just light. He never spoke of it again. But years later, when asked what he feared most, he didn't say snakes or spiders. He said, being remembered wrong. And maybe that's the key. The lights, the patterns, the impossible hour, they're not threats, they're memory. Living, luminous memory that haunts the outback not out of malice, but duty. They're not asking to be chased, they're asking to be understood. The older blokes say the lights have moods. Not colors, not shapes, but temperaments. One night they're shy, flickering at the horizon's lip like a child testing water. The next, they're bold, streaking above the sandhills, breathing down the neck of whatever breathes first. They aren't random, they're watching, choosing. And then, sometimes they take not just people, but time, sense, memory. In the dusty remains of an old research station near the Diamantina, long abandoned and half swallowed by termite mounds, someone found a notebook. It belonged to a woman named Dr. Eloise Wren, part of a joint government-university ecology mission gone silent in 1992. The report stated, disbanded due to funding gaps, but there were no withdrawal records, no transport logs, just one journal, water-stained but legible. In it, Wren wrote about lights appearing at irregular intervals, one every 3 to 5 nights, never in the same direction. Her final entries read like a mind unraveling. "The lights are learning," she wrote. "Not just observing. They react, they anticipate. Tonight I moved left. It met me." Then, in trembling pen, 317 again. I whispered my own name and it didn't sound right. What makes this particularly disturbing is that Wren's handwriting in the last entry doesn't match the rest. It's hers, yes, but reversed, mirrored, as if written by the other side of her hand. Nobody knows what happened to her or her team, but the page still glows under blacklight. We come back then always to 317, that sacred, cursed hour when something moves differently beneath the sky, when the desert holds its breath and listens. In local pub talk, it's become shorthand for dread. Don't drive past Boulia after 317, they say. Don't look at the mirrors. Don't open the boot if something knocks, because sometimes the lights aren't outside. Sometimes they're in the corners of your eye, reflected, not emitted. And that's when they've found you. Not all stories end in vanishing. Some people come back, but changed, like Barry Kettles, who worked remote fencing contracts east of Baduri. One morning he drove into town, dirt-caked, quiet. Not a man of words, but this time he couldn't stop talking. He spoke of the tunnels in the light, of walking through memories that weren't his, of seeing himself from a distance. He said the lights showed him lives he hadn't lived. One where he died young, another where he never left Melbourne, another where he never existed, all at once. "They're not showing you things," he said. "They're asking if you remember them." He vanished 3 days later. His vehicle was found by a dry borehole, still idling, keys in, doors locked from inside. The clock on the dash, 317. People started comparing notes, reports of lights from completely different regions. Kuba Pedy, Marie, even north into the territory, shared common details: disorientation, time loss, mirrored thoughts. There was no central database, no formal investigation, just a slowly growing thread between events. And then a new layer: sound. In recent years, low-frequency hums began accompanying sightings, subaudible but physical. Witnesses reported feeling it in their teeth, chest, bone, the pitch-match frequencies known to induce hallucinations, or clarity, depending on your mind's leanings. Anecdotes turned to data. Someone compiled them: audio clips from car recorders, strange fluctuations in GPS logs, distortions in camera feeds. One sound engineer noticed that, when layered, these sounds formed a pattern. Not music, not noise, but coordinates. One of those coordinates pointed to the very place Arthur Briggs vanished. Another, a spot that doesn't exist on any official map. No roads, no tracks, just flat claypan, broken by one dead tree and a scattering of ancient stones. Local legend says it's a burial site, not for bodies but for stories too dangerous to tell, a place where lies bury themselves and wait for truth to rot. Some believe the lights are protectors of that ground. Others think they are what's buried there, rising up in forms the human eye can almost understand. But everyone agrees on one thing: that place, whatever it is, watches back. And if you stay long enough, it remembers your name. There are places in the desert where no shadows fall, not because the sun fails to shine, but because the light there bends wrong. The earth beneath these places is cracked, not from drought, but from something older, something pushing upward from beneath. Places where compasses spin, birds veer wide, and even the flies avoid landing. The kind of country the Walpiri elders call Jinjira Warlu, the place where the fire walks without feet. One such place lies northwest of Boulia, near the edge of the Simpson, unmarked on maps but etched in rumor. Old drovers speak of it in passing, often after a few drinks, their eyes drifting to windows as if to check the dark. They call it the Hollow. Just that. Nothing else. No coordinates, no trails. Just a shape in memory, a basin too quiet, too still. It was into this place that a documentary team from Sydney ventured in 2012, chasing stories, chasing spectacle. They weren't bushmen, not really. Producers and cinematographers armed with drones, batteries, satellite phones, professional curiosity wrapped in khaki. They stayed 3 nights. Only 2 returned. The tapes they left behind, some damaged, some corrupted, tell a jagged, stammering tale. Footage shows strange movements in the night, not just lights, but shadows within light, something like wings, something like whispers. The audio crackled with bursts of static, always punctuated by the same distortion, a low hum that pulsed every 7 seconds. On the 3rd tape, one of the crew, Emma Lee, sound recordist, speaks directly into camera. Her voice is calm, measured, terrified. "They know what I'm thinking," she says, "not just now, before I got here, before I knew I'd come. They lit the road for me." She then pauses, looks past the lens. "I saw myself standing where I haven't stood yet. Her time of death was listed as unknown. Her body was never recovered. And then there's the pattern, the hums, the lights, the vanishing point that is 3:17 a.m. It all converges again and again in one singular rhythm, one ancient metronome ticking beneath the crust of the Outback. Some physicists, quietly, privately, have suggested there may be a natural pulse in this land, a harmonic resonance born from tectonic stress or magnetic folds. But none can explain why that pulse stops clocks, why it echoes in dreams, why children born near Boulia are more likely to sleepwalk into the bush under full moons. What science tiptoes around, the dreaming says plainly, the land remembers. The land breathes. And sometimes it shows you what it remembers. In 2020, a linguist named Caroline Demain came across a lost dialect, only fragments, preserved in early anthropological recordings. One word kept repeating in different speakers, different locations. Ngandara. Translated loosely, it means to be seen from the inside, not watched, understood, not studied, inhabited. She didn't connect it to the lights at first, not until she visited Boulia herself and spent a week with an elder named Lorraine Munjal. The woman spoke sparingly, mostly in gesture, but when Caroline asked her about the lights, she didn't hesitate. "They come because we forgot," she said, "forgot the way to walk with the sky, forgot how to listen when the land speaks without words." She pointed to the horizon. "They're not ghosts, they're reminders." Caroline left the next day, cancelled her grant, moved inland, started a community language school. She never published her paper. So what are the Min Min lights? Not ghosts. Not ships in the sky, not tricks of heat, but eyes, old eyes, not looking at you but through you to what you carry. Memories not your own, choices you haven't made yet. They come not to lead you astray, but to ask a single, brutal question. Are you who you think you are? And sometimes they answer for you. They say if you stare too long into the lights, you start to feel your name peeling off your skin. Like identity is something that can unstick, lift like old paint. What's left behind isn't madness, not in the traditional sense. It's clarity, raw and unbearable. A kind of knowing too wide to fit inside one mind. Some don't return. Others do, but with eyes that never quite focus, voices that echo just a half-second late. That's what happened to Jamie Reeve. She'd been a ranger, seasoned and grounded, no stranger to odd reports, feral camels, meteorites, sinkholes. She logged them all with a bureaucrat's calm. But on a routine patrol west of Urandangi, she went off-grid, just vanished. When search crews found her vehicle, doors open, gear undisturbed, it was as if she'd simply stepped into the heat haze and dissolved. 2 weeks later, she walked out of the scrub barefoot and silent. Doctors examined her. No injuries, no dehydration, but her speech was wrong. Not slurred, looped. Like her words had been rearranged before she said them. Eventually she could speak plainly again. But when asked where she'd been, she replied, between the moments, with them, learning how to forget. She never elaborated. Now she lives alone outside Cloncurry, never leaves at night. Her clocks have no hands. She keeps the windows covered. When asked what she fears most, she says only that I'll remember it fully. Her file is sealed by Queensland Parks, but her story is only one of many. The pattern, now unmistakable, spreads wide like a bruise beneath the continent. A low-frequency map of memory, trauma, and light. Theories abound. Some speak of the dreaming bleeding into modern time, reclaiming what we've paved over. Others suggest parallel timelines, the lights as markers of choice points. Splits in reality folding in on themselves. But one theory persists, whispered through late-night radio, scribbled in notebooks, posted anonymously to fringe forums. The lights are not from here, not from anywhere. They're what's left when places wear thin. Think of it, this land older than bones, walked on by stories long before boots and wheels. Something must live in the residue, must feed on the echoes we leave behind. Memory has weight, and in a place as heavy as the Outback, that weight must press down somewhere. The lights, then, are not beacons, they are blisters, and maybe they're tired of being ignored. In one final documented incident, a telecommunications technician, Roger Vale, was sent to investigate signal interference near a repeater station northeast of Baduri. He logged no issues initially, but at 3:14 a.m., his satellite phone auto-activated. A transmission went out, not voice, just static. When cross-referenced, the static matched a field pattern from an old analog signal used during nuclear tests in Maralinga in the 1950s. That code hadn't existed for over half a century. There was no hardware in his vehicle capable of generating it. His dashcam caught a final flicker, twin lights hovering just beyond the sand ridge, pulsing in rhythm. He didn't return. His vehicle was found with the engine off, doors locked. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m. That's how the stories keep folding back into each other. A loop, a cycle, an hour etched into the ribs of the country like a warning. And as we approach the hollow, as we come back to that place where Arthur Briggs heard the calling, the signs multiply. The soil remembers, the clocks hold their breath, and somewhere in the dark, the lights hover, not chasing anymore, but waiting for you. They say when you see the min lights, you have three choices: run, follow, or remember. Most choose the first, fewer dare the second, but the rarest and the most marked are those who remember. Because memory out here isn't just recollection, it's a gate. The final case file in the archive is thin. No names, just coordinates and a short, handwritten note, unsigned, aged by dust. It opened again. The hollow is breathing. Below that, in faint pencil, tell no one, or tell everyone. It makes no difference now. The location referenced is deep in the Channel Country. No road access, only known by those who never asked to find it. And yet, once marked, the place draws people. Not just adventurers or thrill-seekers, but the lost, the fractured, those who've seen the lights and weren't quite the same afterward. The last documented visit to the Hollow was in 2023. A trio of amateur documentarians calling themselves Veil Chasers. Their footage, uploaded in fragments, is still debated. The screen flickers often, the audio distorts, but there's a moment, brief, sharp, where the camera captures something not of this world. Not a light, but a shape within light. Like bones made of refracted time, drifting through the dust. Their final message was a whisper, barely audible under static. It's not the lights are the bait. Then, silence. So here we are, full circle. Fire burned low, wind curled like fingers through the spinifex, and still the question burns brighter than any torch. What are the min lights? We've called them UFOs, spirits, hallucinations. We've blamed mirages, the moon, the heat. But perhaps the truth has been crouching beside us all along, waiting for quiet. Perhaps they are the land's way of speaking when no one listens, the language of forgetting made visible. Perhaps they are not here to take us, but to show us what we've already given up. Memory, story, reverence. The dreaming twisted back on itself like a serpent eating its own tail. Or perhaps they are simply watching, reflecting what we fear most, that we are strangers in our own land, blind to the old rules, deaf to the old names. And they, the lights, the orbs, the watchers, they are what's left when the land no longer recognizes us. So if one night, under a too bright moon, you find yourself driving the Birdsville track and something flares in your rear view, floating, silent, pulsing, don't stop, don't chase, and for your own sake, don't follow. Because if you do, you may not come back the same, or worse, you may come back remembered by something that should never have known your name. And if that happens, you'll wake at 3:17 a.m. every single night and wonder what else came back with you.